So a way too early top 25 list for next year came out, and Texas is number one on it. And it's got some people in a tizzy. So we discussed that, but also should Texas be number one in the way too early top 25? That means absolutely nothing. We discuss on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. It's Friday, and on this Friday episode of Locked On Longhorns, once again, the Texas comes in number one in the way too early top 25. A lot of reactions to that. So we discuss on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns. Assuming that that's not going to carry me for 20 to 30 minutes, I will get into some YouTube comments after that, right? Read your YouTube comments and react live on the show. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I know I haven't been responding to YouTube comments the way I normally do. Like, I normally respond to all YouTube comments. That Ohio State reaction video kind of threw me off. You know, any video that hits 10,000 views, has 400 comments, it's hard to respond to all of them. And then it's just kind of been an avalanche since then. The season's been over. I feel like, you know, when you're a teacher, I'm not a teacher, but like when you're a teacher, it's like when school gets out and it's just that immediate, like, you know, the first couple of weeks after school. And I feel like I'm in that phase, but there's really no off season with Locked On. So it's like I'm still recording every day, even though I'm like also in that like decompressing phase of the season is over. You know what I'm saying? Thankfully for Texas, we played into January, you know, so I was able to cover football games longer than most people, but still in that weird phase of like, oh my God, the season's over, but I still got to find things to record about every day. And I just haven't been opening up the app to respond to comments because my mind's been all over the place. So, you know, I'll be able to respond to some of them today. Once again, I saw a list from On3 that had that way too early top 25, like projecting who's going to be the top 25 for the preseason going into next season. I'm going to be able to put it on the screen for my YouTube viewers. For my audio viewers, I'm just going to kind of read it out to you, and you'll have to imagine what I'm looking at. And a lot of reactions to it, right? A lot of reactions to it. So let me go ahead and put it up on the screen first. This way too early top 25 by Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman from On3. Once again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. Starting with number one, you got Texas, 2, Ohio State, Oregon, number 3, Penn State, number 4, Notre Dame, number 5, Georgia at 6, Illinois, South Carolina, Florida, and Clemson round out the top 10. Then you have Auburn at 11, Michigan at 12, Tennessee, Alabama, and then LSU at 15. You have BYU at 16, Arizona State, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Kansas State at 20. And then you have Miami at 21, SMU, Indiana, Georgia Tech, and Nebraska rounding out the top 25 at number 25, right? But really what matters, I think, is the top about 6. Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Georgia, right? More than likely, one of those teams next year will win the national championship. And so I remember when this first dropped, and I still have it on the screen. You know, I'm ugly anyway, but I remember when this first dropped, we have a SEC host chat. And in the SEC host chat, the immediate reaction was like, oh my God, Texas is number one. What have they done to deserve number one? They should be behind Georgia. Texas is already getting that Arch Manning credit. It's going to be so crazy next year when Texas beats Ohio State, a shell of Ohio State championship team, and they get credit for beating the defending national champions. And I'm like, bro, why do we know people hate Texas? Like, we know that. But why? Like, why do people hate Texas so much? What did Texas do? And are we forgetting what a way too early top 25 is. It has nothing to do with this year at all. So I don't get why people are so upset, right? Like, that makes no sense. If we're talking about Georgia should be ahead of Texas, then what's the justification for the 2025 Georgia team being ahead of the 2025 Texas team in the rankings? Obviously, they beat Texas twice in 2024. That doesn't mean that they're automatically better in 2025. And so when we look at the top 6 teams, what would be the justification for any of them being over Texas right now when you look at what Texas is expected to come into the season with, and when you look at what these other teams are expected to come into the season with? Like Georgia, they've lost some really good defenders. I know that they brought in some really good wide receivers out of the portal, Noah Thomas and Zach Branch. I believe that they're still going to have, that running back tandem of Cash Jones and the other one from Compton. I can't remember, but they're going to have a really good running game. You always would expect that they have a really good defense under Kirby Smart, but their quarterback is Gunnar Stockton. I'm going to go ahead and take this off the screen. Their quarterback is Gunnar Stockton. From what you've seen of Gunnar Stockton, does he look better than Arch Manning? Does he look comparable to Arch Manning? Not at all. Not to me. And I'm not even just being biased. Like, Arch Manning looks levels ahead of Gunnar Stockton. Not to mention, Texas is bringing back a hell of a lot of talent too. So if I'm looking at Texas and Georgia right now for 2025, I would project that Texas looks like the better team. Then you look at Notre Dame at 5, right? I believe. Let me put it back up. Yeah. So you look at Notre Dame at 5. Good team this year. That went to the national championship game. But you're losing Riley Leonard. You're losing your tight end. You're going to be losing at least Jeremiah Love, if not both running backs. And you're losing some of your best players on defense. Do I still think Notre Dame will be one of the best teams in the country? Yes. Will they be in the playoffs next year? Of course. But right now, if you look at Notre Dame, you're asking who is their quarterback. And it could be the backup that came in, I believe, against Georgia and made some passes. And then he made that pass on the fake punt in the national championship game. But once again, I asked the question, if that's their backup, we don't even know who their quarterback is going to be. How does he compare to Arch Manning, right? And we looked at Texas this year against Notre Dame, and Texas had a lot more talent to me across the board, right? I thought Texas was comparable with Ohio State in terms of the amount of talent they had. That's going to be a similar situation next year. For Notre Dame, it's not going to be, right? Notre Dame still recruits well. They don't recruit as well as Texas. So you look at it, and Texas is going into the season next year with a clear advantage at the quarterback position, as well as more talent across the board. Even though Notre Dame was just in the national championship game, Texas looks like the better team in 2025. Okay, so number 4, Penn State. I mean, at some point, the Penn State tax has to work against them, right? Like, I understand they're going to have Drew Aller back. They're probably going to have their running backs back. It's still going to be a solid defense, even without Abdul Carter. They're losing their tight end, but, you have a veteran quarterback, veteran running backs. Not sure what they're going to have at the skill positions, but we know the story with Penn State by now, right? Solid defense, very competitive football team, offense that's good, but not good enough. Drew Aller is more experienced than Arch Manning at this point, but who would you take? Not just as a Texas fan, based on what you've seen from Drew Aller, it feels like there's a clear ceiling there. So who would you take? Not to mention, just from a talent across the board perspective, Texas is going to have more talent than Penn State does next year. So Texas ahead of Penn State, really by a mile. And I mean, we know the story, right? Like I said, at some point, the Penn State tax has to work against them. They're good, but not good enough. And maybe Texas is falling into that trap too. I don't know. But either way, right? There's no argument for Penn State being over Texas. Then you look at Oregon. Right, Oregon's going to be super talented. Evan Stewart coming back, DeCorian Moore going up there. You still got the younger Ua Ungale brother, who's a beast on the defense. I'm not sure about the running backs and just who all is staying. And you know what I mean. I know they're losing Dylan Gabriel and some wide receivers, and so that's a question mark. I believe Dante Moore is going to be pretty good at quarterback. It's Oregon. The way that they're spending money, the way that they're recruiting, I think they're going to be really good for sure next year. But when you look at Texas, I think you have more that you can lean on and say, okay, they're for sure going to be a good team, just in terms of returning players. Arch Manning essentially being a known commodity. We haven't seen him over the course of a full season, but we've seen enough of Arch Manning to know that he can play college football at a high level. And Texas returning a lot of really good players. Right now, I would give them the edge over Oregon. So then it comes down to Texas and Ohio State. And I understand that Ohio State just beat Texas by double digits a few weeks ago, right? But like Michigan, after they won the national championship, Ohio State is going to be gutted. Like, thankfully, they won the championship because they're about to lose a hell of a lot of players. All of those playmakers you saw on defense, damn near gone, right? Amika Ibuka, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, like, gone. You know what I'm saying? On offense, Will Howard, gone, right? We don't know who their quarterback is going to be. Now, they still have two of the best players in the country in Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith, and it's Ohio State. They're going to figure it out. But Texas knows who their quarterback is going to be in Arch Manning. And Texas is returning a hell of a lot more talent that are known commodities than Ohio State is right now. It makes the most sense for Texas to be the number one team potentially going into next season, right? On a list that doesn't matter, right? I have to remind myself to put that in there. And yes, there's questions about the offensive line when you're going to be replacing four starters. There are questions about who you're going to have at defensive tackle when you've had nothing but NFL defensive tackles for the last 3 years. Outside of the reinforcements in Jermaine Lole and Bill Norton. But when you look at Texas compared to any other team, especially when you look at the quarterback position and returning talent, there is no other team that says they have the potential or can return what Texas is turning to compete at what Texas is returning next season to compete at a high level. So I know that Texas being number one on a very hypothetical and irrelevant list has a lot of people pissed off. So I thought I'd talk about it, but I think Texas has the best argument going into next season, 8 months from now, right? A quick word from our sponsors. And then we discuss what I discuss. Like I said, I'll react to some of your YouTube comments live on the show after the break. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by Gametime. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live. It's a memory I'll never forget. This year, Gametime makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Gametime Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, which is being there. I use Gametime Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game, and it couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer, no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Curated deals makes it easier to find the best price on great seats. The super deal is the best value for that event. Seat views before you buy, on-time ticket delivery, lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. Let's get into some of these YouTube comments. I haven't even opened up the app in like over a week, so I don't even know what y'all been saying. All right. All right. So this is the SEC squad. They put out SEC success. I'm not even sure what they said, but Texas Longhorns fans said clearly nobody pays attention to the recruiting success Texas has had the last 4 years. Texas has plenty of talent left, even with all the departures to the National Football League. We're like Georgia in that it's a lot of young talent just waiting for their chance to shine. I think people are sleeping on both Texas and Georgia this year. Yeah, Georgia's going to be really good, but I think it's just kind of like the same thing I said about Texas. Like, you have the known commodities that you've brought back, but you look at it like players that are coming in, right? A lot of people have talked about like the 5-star receivers, Jamie French, Khalil Lockett, and Michael Terry. You would expect one or two of them are going to be really good football players. You're getting Cedric Baxter back, right? He hasn't really shown a lot in college football. And so Cedric Baxter, right? That's going to be a big boost for a team competing for a national championship. Like, you look at the offensive line. Yeah, you're replacing Cam Williams, starting on the offensive line, but you're replacing him with a 5-star in Brandon Baker, right? I would expect him to be able to step up on the offensive line and be really good. Second year of Colin Simmons, right? You're losing Jade Barron, but you have really good players in the secondary of like Wardell Mack and Jade. I mean, not Jade Barron, but like Kobe Black. If you're looking at who you're losing at safety and Andrew Makuba, you still got Jelani McDonald and Michael Taft, right? But then somebody like an Xavier Filsaime can step in. So when Texas has continued to have these top 5 recruiting classes, these are the players that can step in and supplement what you're losing, right? We lost how many players to the draft in the Xavier Worthy, Byron Murphy, Adonai Mitchell, Tamondre Sweat class, and then Texas still made it back to the semifinals. Like Texas is at the point now where they're a machine. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't rebuild, we reload. But I know it sounds cliche, but that's what it is, right? Texas is at the point where they're going to be able to compete at this level every year, especially if they keep getting the quarterback position right. And so far, Sark, in terms of his recruits, are 2 for 2, right? Quinn Ewers and then Arch Manning. That doesn't mean that they're going to win a national championship, but that means Sark has put this team in a position where every year they should be in the national championship conversation. So acting like Texas is just going to fall off. I know that was the narrative after last season. There's no way they can lose that much and still be this, competitive. And they were, right? And now you're going to lose a lot of really good players, but you're also returning a lot of really good players as well. You know what I'm saying? Anthony Hill coming back. I didn't even mention him. And then you're supplementing it with players from the portal and then those, top 5 recruiting classes that you've been bringing in. All those players don't hit, but a lot of them do, right? Typically, like these recruiting services and these recruiting analysts aren't as dumb as we like to think. Typically, the players that they, rank very high turn out to be the best players in college and then end up being the best players in the National Football League. Yes, there's some gems. Yes, there's some players that came out of nowhere. But for the most part, the best players in college and the best players in the National Football League were the highest recruits coming out of high school. Like, look at it. You know what I'm saying? Colin Simmons and Jeremiah Smith. Those were both, 5-star recruits. And they came out and played immediately like 5-star recruits, right? So, yeah. Yeah, Texas is going to be really good. I hate that Jonathan is not on here to represent for Texas. Shout out to spelling my name right. I know it's always on the screen, but you know what I'm saying? I still don't take it for granted. I hate that Jonathan is not on here to represent for Texas. This is the latest SEC squad episode. The hate is real, kind of funny, but real. We'll revisit this after the year and see how Arch is. Arch has been in Sark's system for 2 years. Oh, and he's a 5-star and a Manning. Keep that same energy, fellas. That's another thing, too. Like, there's still people in the chat saying that Arch Manning wouldn't be a 5-star if his last name wasn't Manning. Like, okay, if you thought that maybe his high school career at Isidore Newman wasn't spectacular, I guess, if you paid enough attention to it, which you probably didn't, then I guess you can have those thoughts. But what has Arch Manning not shown in his short time in college, right? Or what has he shown in his short time in college that makes you think that he doesn't have the makings of a really good quarterback and a 5-star recruit? Like, that's what I don't get. Because, like I said, it's still people that was in the SEC host chat talking about if Arch Manning's last name was Smith, he'd be a 3-star. I thought he came in last season and balled out. I mean, I seriously, like, I really don't remember a time where it was just like, I mean, of course, against Georgia, you know what I'm saying? Like, against Georgia, okay. But outside of that, like, when they asked Arch Manning to come in, whether it was against Texas Tech the year before, UTSA, ULM, Mississippi State, he didn't have the best completion percentage against Mississippi State, or maybe it was ULM. No, he threw a couple of picks in one of those games too. But like from everything I've seen with Arch Manning, especially now having been in the system 2 years, like I just don't get the Arch Manning hate, right? If you think Texas is not going to be that good, cool, right? If you think Arch Manning is overhyped, maybe. But I mean, he's probably the most hyped recruit of all time. You could have said LeBron James was overhyped, right? He lived up to it. I just don't get this obsession with thinking that Arch Manning is not going to be a good quarterback, bro. Like the Mannings are 3 for 3. What makes you think Arch is going to be the one to fail? You know, they'll say that like we have those burnt orange glasses on, but like, what would be the opposite? Because I really don't like, you know what I mean? And at some point, this is what I always say, like, I always succumb to logic, bro. Like I don't necessarily hate Oklahoma or hate Texas A&M. I never really have. But at some point you have to succumb to logic. Like if Texas A&M has a really good player, if Oklahoma has a really good player, I'm going to say that I thought Jackson Arnold was going to be good. I never just said like, oh, he's going to suck because he's at Oklahoma. I thought Jackson Arnold was going to be good. He wasn't. You know what I'm saying? I thought he was going to be good. So it's like, I just don't get like, for me, that's not how I operate. I'm not a troll. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I call myself a podcast host, an analyst, anything, right? Even a fan, I wouldn't want to be a smart fan. Arch Manning has not shown me anything to make me think that he won't be a hell of a quarterback in college football. But let me get off my box. But I just don't get it. If you want to keep up with Ohio State, just spend, baby, spend. They did spend what reportedly $20 million on their roster. You know, so I don't know how many millions I know we spending some millions, right? I know we spending some millions. I don't know if we spending 20 million. So, you know, maybe we do need to up it to 20 million, right? Everybody in my comments, you know, we need to get in that Texas One Fund, right? We need to help out. I may start I can't say that. That's I can't say that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, maybe I need to start donating some of my locked on check to the Texas One Fund so we can get on Ohio State's level. Cause hey, you know, Michigan cheated. Ohio State dished out the money. Maybe that's what Texas needs to do to get over the hump, right? Maybe we need to cheat a little bit and spend a little bit more money, just a little bit more, right? Quick word from the sponsors, and then I'll read some more of your comments before I go enjoy my weekend. All right. Continuing to read y'all's comments. Roll Tide, roll. Sucks we're not playing y'all next year and hope y'all make the NCAA basketball tournament. Yeah, hope so. Right. I mean, I love Rodney Terry, but sheesh. I am saying this after they beat Missouri, but I mean, after, you know, that's like their first ranked win of the year after going 0-5. But shout out to Jack Harrington, man. Like, I think since either the first or the second Alabama game, he's been like faithfully watching Locked On Longhorns, like faithfully. And that's just so dope, bro. That's so dope. Like I end up having some really good interactions with fans from, you know, other fan bases. And you know, a lot of times like they'll just watch around the time that we're playing and, you know, eventually they'll tail off. Not Jack Harrington. Right. He's been watching Locked On Longhorns for like 2 years now and comments on almost every video. And I greatly appreciate that for sure. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, we're not talking about Alabama on here, but you know, that's love. Let's see. Texas Ohio State week 1 takes balls in all caps. Kahunas from both programs to schedule. Respect. Go Buckeyes. Both teams eyeing this rematch with new rosters all offseason should be incredible motivation for both programs through the spring and summer. No, for sure. I remember last year going into the season, obviously you had week 0 where like the biggest game was Florida State and Georgia Tech. And it's like, look at that now, right? Where Florida State ended up winning 3 games, maybe 4. And then the biggest week 1 matchup was Notre Dame and Texas A&M. And even though Texas A&M ended up being the 8-4 team, Notre Dame in the championship, it still was like Notre Dame and Texas A&M. It was cool, but it was just like, ugh. And then you had Miami and Florida, which was cool, but it was just like, you know. Ohio State and Texas is far from that, right? You're talking about 2 teams that very well could end up in the national championship game against each other again next year. Also coming off the fact that there's an instant storyline going into the game of Arch Manning, right, being the starter for the first time, but also the instant storyline of these teams just played in the Cotton Bowl and Texas is trying to get their revenge. So, I mean, Texas Ohio State is about as big of a game you can get in week 1. You know, we looked at the way too early top 25. Texas was number 1. Ohio State is number 2. More than likely, these 2 teams are going to be top 3 in the poll going into that game. And man, it's going to be fireworks. Let's see. As a Buckeye fan, I guess they're still on my channel. As a Buckeye fan, this episode crystallizes the delusion. I think that the agreed upon lie with Longhorns is that because both Ohio State and Texas won BCS titles, that these programs are the same. There is wide separation between these 2 schools because Ohio State kept winning playoff titles and Texas didn't. Ohio State is still in its home conference, the Big Ten, while Texas moved over not winning and money. Well, damn, Carla Jenkins. Shit. Damn. Okay. Two blue bloods in college football, man. I'm not here to knock Ohio State. Congrats on the championship. I talked about having that guy on the outside, like a Jeremiah Smith or a Jaden Grayhouse, right? I think we have that guy outside, Wingo or Jamie French coming in. I believe it was on Quinn. Not being able to throw the deep ball. Oh, my Lord. We just can't escape the Quinn slander, man. Like, oh, Lord. Yeah, I really like Jamie French's highlights, and I think Ryan Wingo in year 2, especially with Arch Manning, big boost. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we'll see. We'll see who ends up being that guy, right? And I think you're going to see early on against Ohio State, right? Because that's going to be a game where it's going to come down to some moments. And who are you going to throw the ball to in those moments? Who are you going to go to in those moments? We're going to figure that out. Interesting fact, Will Howard rushed for more yards than Riley Leonard and had one less rushing attempt. Interesting to who? You know what I'm saying? Like, interesting to who? Let me read one more. Sark needs to completely entrust Arch Manning in the offense or he'll get an earful from his uncles. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure Peyton Manning and Eli Manning are the boogeyman. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, I think, if Sark fully entrusted Quinn and 90% of people are telling me that Quinn can't shine Arch Manning's shoes, then I'm pretty sure he'll fully entrust Arch Manning. But like, once again, I don't think so. I got all the respect in the world for Sark, man. Maybe not after that play call, but I got all the respect in the world for Sark. And like I said, I don't think Peyton Manning and Eli Manning are the boogeyman. You know what I'm saying? I don't think they're going to be breathing down Sark's throat, telling him how to play Arch. But we'll see, man. Y'all have a good weekend. I know the snow is mostly melted everywhere, so, stay safe, stay warm, stay cool, horns up always. Hook 'em. Hold on. All right, hook 'em. Peace.